in the French Quarter doing a tour, and I got an email from Jan Ramsey at OffBeat asking me if I wanted a job. She, I think, had asked a couple of writers in town that she knew if they could recommend anybody, and they were like, here's this new girl who knows nothing. Why don't you go hire her?
Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us on the Elation Podcast today. We enjoy exhilarating euphoria through creation and collaboration. Today, we are here with Amanda Mester. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, good. Nice to have you here.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Always good to have a good, full New Orleanian here.
Well,
even though you've been all over the place.
I have been all over the place.
From what I've read about you, you've been all over the place.
I think many New Orleanians would take umbrage with you saying that I am a through and through New Orleanian.
But that's okay. We enjoy our well-traveled guests.
Thank you.
But tell us a little bit about your origin story, because it's very interesting.
I had quite a unique childhood. I was born in New York City.
Okay.
And then about a year and a half later, moved to Europe. My parents, both professional musicians. They're classical musicians. So my father, who's 90, still conducts orchestras. Wow. He just finished a concert in Mexico City, which is where he's from. And my mom was an opera singer. And so for most of my early childhood, I was basically their carry-on luggage as they crisscrossed the world
and tried to make money in their industry. Yeah,
they did. And so I moved around a lot. I was in Basel, Switzerland until age 4. Then we moved to Cologne, Germany.
Wow.
I was there until I was 8, and then moved to Los Angeles.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was raised there. I lived there from the ages of 8 until 22 or so.
In LA?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I moved to New York.
So in Europe, do you have any fond memories of Europe?
I do. Where we lived was very cosmopolitan, very diverse, lots of different languages being spoken on any given day. My first fluent language was actually Portuguese. I had a Portuguese nanny, and my parents traveled so much that they were almost never there.
That's a difficult language.
It is, and I don't know any of it anymore, so don't ask.
Okay. Yeah, it's like I learned Latin once, but don't ask me.
Yeah, right. And so I think, I got exposed to a lot of different forms of, creative artistry and human expression at a very young age, which I think, naturally led me to where I am today.
No, that's awesome. No, and I mean, music is so diverse and huge when you introduce it young to kids. I have a 4 and a 2-year-old son, both sons, and the first thing I did was buy them an instrument, because I want them in the room to be touching it, feeling it, and my little 2-year-old comes out with the guitar and acts like he's playing it. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah, I was the opposite in a sense. I mean, I tried all different kinds of instruments. I tried the piccolo and the harp and the clarinet.
God, the harp is extremely hard.
I know. I chose because I wanted to be different, I guess. I wanted to pick the weirdest.
Why don't you do the stand-up bass while you're at it?
Listen, it's funny that you say that. I just went to go see the Leon Bridges show, and there was this tremendous double bass player in the opening band, and it looked so cool. And I thought, man, I really missed
It's one of the hardest instruments to play.
And it's so cool.
It's so cool. And it's amazing.
No, I tried all of it. I even sang in the Los Angeles Children's Choir and was horrendous. I mean, they let me in, just because they worked with my dad, I think. And I don't have any of that kind of musical talent. I just didn't have the patience for it. And I think also part of me wanted to be different from my parents. And music had just become such a normal thing that I think I understand that. Resented it a little bit at a young age.
I could
And
understand
now, of course, I regret it. Yeah. I mean, I wish I had stuck with all of it, and I didn't. What are you going to do? I think the musical quality that my parents' brains have translated into mine just through writing as opposed to creating music.
Yeah, well, we all have our own place for it, and as much as I love music, I started in music as music production, and that's how I fell in love with it. But then I realized how much I had to learn, because I was in my early 20s when I fell in love with it.
Yeah, right.
So then you got to learn how to make money in music if you're going to switch to it. So, listen, there's all kinds of different places for everybody in that world, but the creative mind and the math and the because music is math to me, and I'm good at math and science, but music, just like your dad's 90 and still doing orchestras, like there's a reason for that. It's because he's had to use his brain very intricately, being creative, and I feel like it helps in a lot of those aspects, as long as you keep moving in it.
Yeah, right.
I talked with George Porter was here for a music
no big
video.
Deal. Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, and I was talking to him because he plays gigs that you don't expect him to be at, and his response to me is, I'll play any gig. Yeah. And he goes, the reason why, number one, arthritis. I don't want to stop playing because I don't want my arthritis to kick in. But number two is I want my brain to keep moving.
It's exactly what my dad says. That's why my dad never retired.
Yeah. It's crazy how what it does to you, So, but being young and getting into it. So, tell me a little bit about LA.
LA is a really special place.
Because I lived there for 9 years, so
And what is your thought about it? Because I think it's going to lead perfectly into what I was going to say.
Okay, well, I loved it. It was the best thing I ever did in my life. Had to get the fuck out.
Those of us who are from LA, I consider myself to be from LA by virtue of having, lived there, longest part of my life. But I actually identify more, I think, with being from New York now.
Well, you have California on your arm.
I do. But I also have like hip hop all over, and that's all New York stuff. I think being from LA and then moving to LA, you have two very different experiences of the city. My friends that I have who are born and raised in LA and who are still there are the complete antithesis of what folks generally conceive of when they think of an LA person. Right. And I'm sure that there are commonalities here too. It's the transplants who give the place a bad name, right?
Absolutely.
No offense. And LA's a really unique place. I mean, it is too enormous to be encapsulated easily in one conversation. But if you know where to go, there's some really incredible things, really special, sacred cultures and traditions and food and all this kind of stuff that kind of gets overshadowed by all the glitz and the glamour.
Yeah,
right?
no, 100%.
It's a great place.
Well, so I loved it. It was the best thing I ever did in my life.
How was the 405 for you?
Oh, God.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
But listen, I was in music, so I got to do a lot of listening.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I used those moments the best I could.
Yeah.
So same thing. The guys that I've met out there, and actually one of the first guys that I attached to out there is from LA and from the Valley, and still one of my best friends, and would never replace him with anybody else.
Right.
Like he's original as it gets, an LA streetwear brand guy, and but it having a friend like that really she showed me a lot of the best things about LA.
Superpower to have
100%. And I really enjoyed LA. What I did not enjoy about LA was the business I was in.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was more about I tell people all the time, I was like, I feel like no matter how big I got in LA, which I wasn't big in LA, I'm just saying how if I ever was to get big in LA, I'll never own what I'm doing.
Yes, right. Yep.
And I come from a very entrepreneur background. My grandfather and real estate and things, and music is a complete opposite of what everybody else in my family has ever done. So it's such an outlier. But in my head, I was like, man, I'm not going to do something out here that I can go back and feel comfortable with, because I want to own it. I want to make a stamp.
Yep.
And
it's hard to do that. It's a very big pond.
It's very big pond, and everybody's got more money than you, no matter how much money you have.
I know.
So it got to a point where, like, all right, I've met enough people. I understand the industry. I've been back and forth with New Orleans. I understand what New Orleans is missing right now. And I said, you know what? It's time for me to pick up, go home, and do something in the creative space that will help New Orleans artists become as efficient as LA artists. And if I do that, I'll own it.
Yep.
And it will be my space.
Yep.
And so that was the end all thought process with it. But I would have never been able to do that without going to LA and get my ass kicked.
Yep.
And being that far away from the family and having no support and being able to having to meet everybody individually yourself that you're doing stuff with and create a whole new life. Like literally my LA life is way different than any other life that I've ever built, you know? And I'm sure you understand that. But also I was able to pick up a little bit of everywhere because when you move to LA, you don't necessarily know where to live.
That's true.
So many spaces.
That is true.
So like I started in North Hollywood.
Okay.
Then I had a studio on Burbank Boulevard that I lived in for a year and a half. And then I went to Silver Lake for about 6 months. Then I lived in my clothing store that I had with Bobby, my Valley guy, on Hollywood Boulevard for like a year. And but on the other side of 101, we were 5123 Hollywood Boulevard. And then I moved to 1600 and Vine, which was my favorite place. That I think because I felt like either I could get to everyone or everybody would come to me because I was centralized. So it wasn't more than 25, 30 minutes from most places. Everywhere else, I felt like if I was in Burbank and somebody was downtown, nobody was coming, you know, or you know, and so like you have to kind of figure out where you fit in your lifestyle, and that took 4 years.
Right.
In LA.
Yeah. By the time, I know. It's an intricate place. I almost was always on the West Side. I lived for a couple of years in Koreatown, but other than that, I was always a West Side girl. So the thought of going to Silver Lake for anything, I would rather not.
Right. Yeah. So it's just a lot of learning, that you go through, and a lot of growing up. I feel like you do in that city.
True. And people say that a lot about New York, but I think LA also, it's a different kind of concrete jungle rat race. You know, insert whatever metaphor you want.
Right.
Can be a very isolating place just by virtue of just being so completely separated from everything and everyone at any given moment, right? I mean, it's you have to plan your entire day about around meeting someone from
100%, right? Especially since my favorite place is the Santa Monica Pier.
Well, that's an issue.
It's a huge issue. I mean, like, you know, like, am I really going? You know?
Yep, it's an investment.
But some of my favorite moments were walking out by myself on the pier and looking out the water and just taking deep breaths and trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing out here.
Yeah, it's a good place for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell me a little bit about New York.
New York is the greatest place on earth. Once I started to fall in love with hip hop, to backtrack a little bit, when I started to reach my high school years, I started to develop this little seed in my brain, which was like, oh, the birthplace of hip hop. I want to go there. It was my birthplace, and it's the birthplace of hip hop. I should be there, right? And then eventually, I got more serious about it, and I happened to get into grad school at Fordham University in the Bronx. So I had like a reason to go back to New York.
Gotcha.
But it feels so much like home to me. I miss it tremendously. If I could live there again, I would. I ended up being there for 6 years, from 2010 to 2016, and I went to grad school there, and that's where I really launched my writing career in a serious way. It's also, I taught college for a few years out of grad school, and I lived that New York lifestyle in your 20s, right? I was an office manager for an acupuncture clinic, and then I was an office manager for a construction company, and then I had this job and that job, right? And so I really did the thing, I think, and I think everyone should live in New York, especially if they can in their 20s. It's similar to your LA experience. I think it's like a tremendous way to learn what your strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah, no, a big city will do that to you.
It is true.
You
It is
know,
true.
a big city will do that too, because New Orleans, we're a big, small city, so
Yeah, right.
everybody knows everybody.
Everybody knows everybody.
Everybody knows everybody. So when you get to a big city, there are so much. There's so much cultural stuff you learn. Honestly, growing up here, and people can. There's racism everywhere, obviously. But growing up here, we were a little more blended.
That's for sure.
I don't think I really saw true racism until I ended up in LA.
That makes sense to me.
And then I really saw the separation, and I was like, wait a minute. It was like, because we all grew up together here. We don't have a whole lot of separation down here. So it was. You learn bits and pieces about culture and why the world is the way it is when you get out of your little bubble, But a big city will just slap you in the face with it.
Yeah, it's true. I love it.
Yeah, no, I love it. Like I said, it was the best thing I ever did. My wife, who her and I have known each other since 7th grade.
Cute.
But we haven't been dating that long. But we came back together when I moved back from LA, actually. But she went to New York right after college and lived there for 2 years and loved it.
Yeah,
and same thing, and says the same stuff. It just was amazing. But tell me a little bit about what you're doing down here, though.
I moved here on a whim. At the time, I had gotten a little sick of living where I was in Brooklyn. It was changing so fast, and the same old story. Little neighborhood shops being taken over, by Whole Foods or whatever.
Right.
The usual shit that happens. And it was losing the communal aspect of it that I had fallen in love with. And I came here for I'm a February baby, so depending on the given year, Mardi Gras is around the same time.
Right.
And so in that year in particular, I'd never come here before, and Mardi Gras, I think my birthday was on on Ash Wednesday that year. So I was like, well, fuck it. If I'm going to go to New Orleans for my first time, I guess I'll go for Mardi Gras. And by that, I mean I didn't know shit, so I went to Bourbon Street.
Right.
Like every other idiot who goes to Mardi Gras for their first time, right?
Right.
But beyond that, I there was this like inherent appreciation for the history of this place that I noticed in conversation with basically everyone that I interacted with, whether it was the bartender or the Uber driver or what have you. Like there's this inherent protection and sanctity of the history of this place.
It's very European.
Well, you don't get that in cities like LA and New York, which have become so large and disparate and so expanded beyond
hell.
Beyond yeah exactly. And so I really loved that aspect of New Orleans. I actually a lot of the trees and the architecture actually kind of reminded me of some of the neighborhoods back home in LA. Some of it really reminded me of parts of Melrose and even Hancock Park and Venice. I mean, I found myself kind of attracted to that aspect of it. But then I also liked that it had this kind of 24-hour, party vibe that echoed somewhat the like vibrancy of New York City for me.
And it works great with creativity.
Yeah. And people smoke weed out here like they're from LA. So there were lots of appealing characteristics about New Orleans. And so I ended up like a million other, transplants, like, oh, this place is so magical. I'm going to just move there, right? So I did. And at the time I had the luxury of moving because I was working from home full-time. I had a full-time editing job for, ironically, a career advice website. And the reason that it's ironic is that the day that I landed in New Orleans to move here, the website closed. I literally got off the plane at the airport and I had no job. So I really had to get my shit together in a real way once I got here. And I was also writing at the same time. So I still had that work, but I had to get a job. And so I ended up getting my tour guide license and doing ghost and vampire tours in the French Quarter.
Yeah.
And then eventually I graduated to doing the cemetery tours. And I was training to do the music history tour when this job at OffBeat fell into my lap. And so My origin story in New Orleans is just one of blind luck and unemployment.
There's a lot of stories in New Orleans that have happened like that, you know.
It's true.
Sometimes we jolt you in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, well, just to talk about the tours for a minute. So I own a couple tour booths downtown. So
Cute.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I do.
So you were the ops because we worked out of the Voodoo Lounge.
Okay. All right. Did you ever meet a guy named Groovy down there?
No, but I wish I had because he sounds fabulous.
Oh, he was amazing. He was the best worst employee I ever had in my life. He would show up drunk, sell more tours than anybody else, do really well for a couple weeks, and then disappear for 3 weeks. And when he got back, he went surfing in like this random place in Costa Rica and just turned his phone off for 3 weeks.
He's a fucking legend, is what you're saying.
Yeah. But like guys like that is who worked for me for the tour booths. So like it was a crazy. And I sublease now, but I still have a couple of tour booths down there. It's a crazy business.
It is an insane business.
Yes,
but a great way, especially for someone who's a complete, new person.
50% commission.
Yeah, but also just a master class in not only New Orleans, but the strange tension between having this tourist industry and then having this beautiful architecture and stuff that needs like tremendous protection and like, with the drunk bachelorette parties. I mean, it's just, it's a real master class
100%
in New Orleans to be working in the French Quarter as a tour guide for a summer.
100%. No, and the VCC is no joke.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you even look at their shutters the wrong way. They're going to give you a citation. I know.
It's the worst and best thing that's down there.
Well, one day, not for this episode, maybe on another episode on another show, we can talk about the incredibly horrendously racist origins of the VCC.
Oh God, yeah.
The ideas they had about who belonged where back then.
Well, and I feel like there's been a lot of generation changes in the VCC as well, because you're right, it started very
not good.
Yeah. But we've had a lot of different cultural collides down in the quarter. This is true. So it doesn't surprise me that we were arguing over spots in the beginning of it. Yeah. But well, tell me a little bit about OffBeat Magazine. How did all that start? Because OffBeat was big down here.
OffBeat. I had a friend in New York who used to be a distributor for CDs and tapes, and one of the businesses that he distributed to was the Louisiana Music Factory.
Okay.
And so by virtue of that relationship, he learned about OffBeat because at the time the offices were just above on Frenchman, above the music store. And so he just mentioned the magazine and said, hey, when you move there, maybe just reach out to them, see if they need writers. And so, I did. And they did reach out back, and I wrote a couple of, one-off things here and there for them. But then life got in the way. I had to get the tour job, and, I didn't have as much bandwidth to pursue freelance writing at the time. And so life goes on. I spend about a year here and in the French Quarter doing a tour, and I got an email from Jan Ramsey at OffBeat asking me if I wanted a job. And I guess the previous digital editor was leaving, and she, I think, had asked a couple of writers in town that she knew if they could recommend anybody. And they were like, here's this new girl who knows nothing. Why don't you go hire her? And she did. She did. And it fell in my lap. And, as a kid, before I could really articulate what it was I wanted out of life, I knew I wanted to be a magazine editor. I had this dream of like moving to New York and, working at Rolling Stone and all this kind of stuff, right? And so the job at OffBeat was, without question, a very spiritually rewarding job. It was one of the first times in my life where I felt like, oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
People were gracious enough to, invite me in to spaces and teach me lessons along the way. And I'm incredibly indebted to the New Orleans music community for giving me the opportunity to learn in real time a lot of the history, right? Mm-hmm. The job was wonderful. I ended up being there for 3 years, and very, very small team, only about 4 of us. And so everybody did a little bit of everything. I got to interview a lot of incredible folks. I would say probably maybe 80% of my social circle now I can trace directly to relationships that I built while I was over at OffBeat.
Wow.
And there's no question that the reason I'm still in New Orleans is because of that chapter of my life.
Yeah, because it was a big magazine.
I mean, it had been around for 30, at this point, I think like 35 with all is said and done. And, you know, to remain in print for that long is pretty remarkable achievement. To also, on top of that, produce the Jazz Fest Bible, which is this like mini, very thick additional edition that is put out for Jazz Fest. It was a lot of really, really hard work. But, you know, wherever we had an archive room at the office, and there's just crates and crates and crates of 30 years worth of these magazines, which are just like such a repository of New Orleans music history, and that I hope someone out there will take and store.
It should be part of a museum.
I agree. Yeah, I tried to see if we could get it maybe adopted a couple of places when I was still working there, and was unsuccessful. And I hope that someday they land somewhere safe.
Yeah, I would think that would be a pretty positive piece for a museum.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's just, you know, there's a lot of it.
Yeah. You'd have to dedicate a whole
It's a lot of space.
Setup, yeah.
But yeah, it was great. I mean, I got to talk to the coolest people on earth, you know.
What do you think was the push for the end of it?
I think there are a couple of reasons for it. I think the main one, the more obvious one, is just the decline of print in general.
Right.
I think that in a lot of ways the magazine was written for visitors, right? For people who love New Orleans culture and want to read about it and have it in their house and stuff like that. It's not necessarily for locals.
Right.
And so you then become inherently dependent on a demand for it, people's ability to spend money on travel or, you know, magazine subscriptions or whatever. It's a very tenuous business model. And then I think Jan started this baby at a time when no women were doing it. She worked really hard, I think, to maintain the business and to remain authentic to what she always said her mission was to protect New Orleans music.
Right.
And I think when you spend that much of your life shepherding something, it becomes really difficult to allow others to help steer it into its next chapter and adapt.
Yeah.
And so I think there was just kind of a little bit of a history of pushback on updating the website, for instance, right? Like, and by the way, all of these things are not easy things to do. They cost money, right? And so it's not like, oh, I'm just going to hire someone and we're going to build a new website or we're going to build an app or whatever. It's not that easy.
Especially somebody who's been doing print for 30 years, looking at a website's foreign language,
right?
You know.
So I think it was just a combination of all that kind of stuff, plus then COVID,
right?
And then it never went into print again after that, right?
Yeah,
and so
COVID screwed a lot of things up.
I do think that ultimately at the end of the day that OffBeat is, you know, has been a valuable asset in terms of the preservation of New Orleans music history. And there is a need for that.
Oh yeah, well, you know? And there's a whole music culture that down here that has to be saved, protected, and created, coordinated, not created, coordinated better.
Yeah, the infrastructure is just not there.
It's just not there. And then that was part of why I came to Build Elation was we just don't, we've been forgotten about since Katrina as far as infrastructure in the industry, in the music world especially. Yeah. The film industry is built up a little bit, but you know where that is now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, but we learning what I learned in LA and then coming back home, I'm like, man, we're 15 years behind.
It's incredibly frustrating, especially given the the level at which other markets extract New Orleans influence does not match up to the investment that's being made in supporting the generation of that here, right?
Well, we also have a little bit of a culture that doesn't adapt to outside things either.
Yeah, I can see that.
We have
it's a little bit of a
have a really bad cycle.
Yeah, which is understandable, right? Because I mean, without sounding, too cliche, this place deserves to be better protected, right?
Right.
From the vultures of the world, I suppose.
The outside.
And it's a tenuous line. It's a hard line to walk between wanting to expand and evolve while also remaining protective of something that for so many years in history has just been completely abused. It's the same story as
OffBeat. I mean, it truly is in a sense because a lot of the local musicians don't want to change, and that can be a problem.
Yeah.
But there is a balance in that.
Yeah.
And other cities can do it. Nashville can do it. Memphis can do it. Miami can do it. Atlanta can do it. Chicago can do it. Why can't we do it?
Yeah, it's a strange place also, right? Because it's just like it holds this strange place also in the touring market, right? Like depending on the size of the artist, they'll just go to Dallas or Houston or somewhere in Florida, but they'll just not come here, which is so strange, right? And frustrating because this place is like such a rich place for music of all kinds, right? It's incredibly frustrating that we live in this strange limbo state, it feels like, where
I agree.
We're a music capital of the universe, right? But we don't even have a venue that suits a mid-sized capacity for a touring artist or whatever, right? It's incredibly frustrating.
You go from the Fillmore with 2,500 all the way to Champion Square, but there's nothing in between.
Yeah, it's strange. It is very strange.
No, I agree. And the city has to do more to support. They absolutely have to do more to support. But they have to get out their own way first.
That's true.
Let's talk a little bit about the Gentilly Agency.
Okay.
Tell me how all that started and...
Well, it started one day when I got a DM from Raj Smoove, who was at that time someone I had not yet met, but whose name, of course, was always being brought up. Almost anyone in New Orleans hip hop that I've interviewed
loves Raj.
Mentions him as an instrumental figure in their development, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's the one. And so he DM'd me.
But you can't miss him in a crowd. I mean,
that's true.
He's 2 feet taller than everybody.
That's true. He's got an entirely different ecosystem up there.
Better air, everything.
Better air. That's true. Yeah, he DM'd me one day out of the blue because he needed someone to write a bio for an artist that he worked with, D-Lo Diamond Man. Shout out D-Lo. And so that's how we started talking. And then eventually I was like, hey, you want to try to do a cover story? And so we did a cover story for OffBeat, and our friendship grew from there. And we just started working together, not in any formal capacity, but just pick up things as they came along.
Right.
And so we're talking the summer and fall of 2019 when all of this is kicking into gear. So the year turns over and we start thinking about what we would like to do. He already had an idea. He wanted to start an agency and he wanted to call it the Gentilly Agency because that's where he's born and raised and that's where his studio is. And so we started to have conversations about that, and we started to kind of really try to put a public-facing image to it. And then the world shut down. And so we did a lot of stuff behind the scenes, but it really wasn't until the last 2 years, I would say, that we really expanded to the point where we actually have 2 additional folks on our team who are fabulous, Kyle and Celeste. We love them. And, so we do a lot of different stuff. We work primarily with artists in a management capacity. But beyond that, a lot of support in terms of writing bios for folks, getting their website language and copy together, sending out, pitches, helping coordinate tours, helping to coordinate, sponsorship stuff and book shows and music videos and that kind of thing. And to echo your point previously, Raj's central thesis throughout all of the years that we've been working is like New Orleans for New Orleans, right? And exactly the same thing you said, which is they're doing it there, let's do it here.
Right.
And so that was his reasoning for starting the agency in the first place, was just recognizing a lack of very basic, accessible infrastructure for local musicians,
right,
to assist them not just in improving their artistry as individual performers, but also introduce them to folks outside of the city, to expand their professional networks, et cetera, et cetera. And so it has been one of the superpowers of my chapter, I think, living in New Orleans, is having had the luck of crossing paths with Raj.
We should all be so lucky.
He will go down in history as one of the greatest people ever.
I agree.
And anyway, so he's the best. We love him. And yeah, so the Gentilly Agency, we're a small family.
When you work with a bunch of artists in town, don't you?
I mean, I have, in various capacities, between working at OffBeat, before working at OffBeat, and then kind of throughout the pandemic, and then into working with Raj, I've done a bunch of different stuff along the way. When I first moved to New Orleans, I wrote a couple of articles about the history of New Orleans underground hip hop scene. I wrote something for Genius about Baton Rouge hip hop, and so I met a lot of hip hop artists when I first moved here, and then I started to do events, my own. I wanted to throw what I thought was something that wasn't really happening on a lot, was like more obscure underground independent hip hop artists coming here to New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And so I did a couple of shows. I had a Detroit MC come to the Blue Nile and perform with a full band, which was really cool. I did a couple of things over at Howlin' Wolf and at Gassa. And then I left OffBeat and I started to do more of the PR stuff. So I was helping artists, writing their press releases and helping them to verbalize like what it is that they wanted the world to know about their music, and how to help them reach out to folks who could generate some press for them or whatever. Lots of bios, lots of PR support at festivals and coordinating interviews on site. So I've done a little bit of everything. Almost all of it involves the written word, though. The vast majority of it in some way has to do with writing in some capacity. Yeah.
So that's really your creative tool.
That is my creative tool. Yeah. I think what happened essentially was that I think in middle school and then in high school, my teachers started to like refer to me as the writer. So as a young person, I was like, oh, adults are telling me that that's something that I'm good at. So maybe that's what I should be doing.
Right.
And then as I began to fall in love with hip hop more and more and more, I was like, oh, I could write about that. Right. And so I think that's how it started.
What would be some advice that you have for someone who is wanting to be or aspiring to be a writer in today's AI world?
Yeah. I mean, whether it's AI or whether it's someone that you hire for cheaper or whether it's some computer program or whatever, there's always going to be like a cheaper, non-human form of creative expression. I think that that's a mainstay throughout history. So to me, AI is not necessarily introducing anything new in the sense that people were always able to pay more money to have something done for them in a way that made it less intensive for them to do it themselves.
Okay.
Right? And so for me, what's most important is to be cognizant of the nature of adaptability. And by that, I mean if you want to work in the music industry, no matter if it's as a writer or anything else, like you have to be adaptable because the landscape and the DNA of it today is going to be different than what it is going to be tomorrow by virtue of technology and globalization and all this stuff, right? And so it is your responsibility to be adaptable. And one of the best ways to be adaptable is to remain completely authentic to what it is that you do well, what it is that brings you joy. And that makes you a sustainable creative.
Right.
Right? So to not bend necessarily always to the whims of technology in this form, AI. If you want to be a writer, the best way to do it is to just do it. And I know that that sounds, silly. But what I mean by that is you have to just get it out there. One of the best ways to do that is to just start your own blog, right? And to just publish things, not because you're being paid for them, but because you want to build a portfolio. It's just the nature of the beast. It is just one thing that you should do.
It's similar to musicians.
Yeah. I mean,
you have to put the music out there. It doesn't do any good in your computer. So
yeah, right.
Like it has to be out there in the world to be read or to be heard or seen.
And AI might be able to replicate certain components of the written word or even song making, but it can never recreate what it is that you're bringing to the work.
Right. Well, and I keep saying this: AI can never is never going to be able to replace live musicians. So,
I mean,
if we stick to live music, everything's going to be just fine.
I think that's sticking to live music, I think also to just writing for the sake of writing.
Well, there's a human element.
Yeah.
That AI can't have.
Yeah. Right.
So there's got to be in your writing. There's got to be some type of human element that is real.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's so important to just write the way you want to write, because that is ultimately it's what's going to keep you motivated to keep doing it, because you're doing it in a way that makes sense for you. But also it's what's going to make you stand out, right? If you bring something unique and nuanced to the way that you write, and that is going to be informed by your lived experience, which again is something that AI is never going to be able to replicate.
100%.
So just start writing.
Yeah, just start writing.
Just start writing, put it out there.
Start writing. Well, I have...
Good Lord.
Is that rain?
Yeah, it's rain.
Sweet. Hell yeah. It's kind of nice. It's like a little ambiance.
It's a little soothing,
Yeah.
I can try to mess it up later.
I think it would be. Would be funny if you just made it louder.
Yeah,
actually.
This is the spa adulation.
There you go. I think it's great.
Yeah, we have the rain wall here.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, look, we just put the rain wall on the green screen, and it'll all make sense.
See,
yes.
There it is.
But I wanted to ask you about justice studies.
Okay.
Because I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, right. So justice studies, in the terms of this very specific program at UNO that I'm enrolled in, is essentially about how to apply social justice in research. It's informed by the kind of Eurocentric, white supremacist, colonialist, imperialist context in which research as we think of it was born, right? So thinking about things like white anthropologists, going to sit and watch indigenous people and write about all the crazy, weird things they do that don't make sense, right? And then that becomes repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated to the point that it just becomes taken for granted that, they're living backwards and they're uncivilized, and we're the enlightened ones and we're trying to help them civilize themselves, right? And so research has always had this incredibly complicated and problematic relationship with how we think of knowledge and whose knowledge we value. And so it's kind of how about restructuring our entire academic system by applying non-traditional ways of thinking about knowledge and the reality of existence to addressing some kind of social issue that we see in our lives.
Well, because we are kind of forced to learn from certain people because those were the people who wrote the research or the books from back then, and there's nowhere to get a time travel and go back.
Exactly.
So and I'm not. My wife and I, we have religious beliefs, but we're not necessarily like all the way, we're not going to church.
You're not assholes about it.
Yeah, well, we're not going to church every, but we do believe there's something above us in some, form of whatever it is. But you are kind of forced to learn from one group of people because we grew up Catholic. So,
oh, how are they loving the Pope news in your family? They must be really happy about it, right?
We don't really talk about it. Like I
Nice.
said, we're not really that religious.
Nice.
Like, we don't really talk.
Fuck it. Who cares? He's from the seventh ward?
Yeah. I mean, well, I think that part's cool in a sense because they're from New Orleans and, but I don't know. I mean, if anything, the only thing I thought was, well, from what I understand, this guy was aligned with the last Pope, so he's probably going to be similar in aspect. That was probably my only thought process with it.
Yeah.
But once again, it's kind of like 6 degrees of separation. My grandfather used to always saying, worry about what you can control. And I don't think I can control any of that. It's
true.
So, now don't get me wrong. I do like some of the structure and things that religion does for you in a sense of a mindset but there's with anything, there's always a negative side to humanity.
Totally.
So, if you have to understand both sides, I feel like, to truly have a good grasp. And you can't be all the way this way and then all the way not conforming. You kind of have to be dead center to understand both sides, and I feel like that is a healthy way to grow up. Believe that you're not Jesus Christ. Something else is above you that created all this, whether it's science or whether it's religion or whatever it is. You're just a part of the process. I feel like helps you humble yourself a little bit, but yeah, there's a lot of bullshit with anything, you know? So
there do be a lot of bullshit about lots of things.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, the Justice Studies program, I think, for me personally, there's for sure a through line between, having been exposed to music in the way that I was and then ending up in this program. I think as a child, I developed this understanding that human expression is human expression. It doesn't matter, traveling with my parents as they work in South Africa or in the Middle East or in Australia, right? I'm exposed to all these different ways of thinking about the world and how to express that through music. And so at a young age, I kind of just accepted that not only was music a universal thing, regardless of our location in the world, but also a necessity, right? To be able to create and enjoy art is a fundamental part of being a human. That's just the way it is. And so...
Well, and music can speak across any language.
Right. And so because of that, to me, music and the people who make it, I always held in high esteem, and oftentimes in higher esteem than those who were traditionally told to listen to, right? And then, so I had that as a foundation. And then once I became a teenager and I became exposed to underground hip hop, and I started to listen to a lot of like Brand Nubians and Poor Righteous Teachers and Freestyle Fellowship and The Coup and like all of these artists who are, creating quote unquote reality rap, right? I was listening to all of that stuff. And then I'm also listening to like America's Most Wanted by Ice Cube or Black on Both Sides by Mos Def or any of Queen Latifah's albums. And so it started to become incredibly apparent to me that one of the things that was leading me to be so interested and attracted to this form of music was that it was exposing me to things that I didn't necessarily have any material experience with myself. So, disproportionate levels of violence at the hands of the carceral system, or, disproportionate levels of access to healthy food, or issues of addiction, or, insert any social ill that disproportionately faces Black and brown people in this country. So I think coupled with this foundation that I had by virtue of my parents that like music is important and special and we need it, with like shit is fucked up and it is more fucked up for other people than it is for you, and why is that, led me to become, I think, in some way radicalized.
Gotcha.
By hip hop music, right? So for me, there is no separation between the music and justice.
Yeah, well, hip hop is social justice.
It is an inherently political act, and any form, in the context of this country specifically, any form of Black American music, Brown American music, Indigenous music is an inherently political act because it was born and forged in the context of white supremacy and slavery and Jim Crow and abhorrent treatment, genocide, etc. So,
well, with every action, there's a reaction, and hip hop is the reaction.
Yeah, I mean, it is born out of struggle, and it is, I think, in some way the responsibility of a white consumer of it like me to be an active listener, right? And to recognize that while, yes, sure, I like the way it sounds and it's like got a good groove and I'm bobbing my head around and all that kind of shit, and I like to go to the shows and whatever else, like what they're saying is underpinning all of that other shit, right? And so it became impossible for me to separate music from issues of justice.
I agree with you, but I'm going to push back a little bit on new hip hop, because I agree with you on hip hop that I grew up listening to. I'm born in 85. So, the 90s, the early 2000s, that hip hop was social justice. It was telling you about what their situations. It was trying to teach you about things. There was a movement behind it. I don't agree with that anymore. I think new hip hop is stupid and not truly engaging with the world. It's more clickbait and trying to become famous than it is actually telling a story. And now I'm not saying that there aren't any artists that are telling a story, because there is, but there's very few, and it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's just my view on it.
I would say that that's always been the case. Big Daddy Kane's making records about, partying and fucking, and at the same time that, quote unquote conscious rap is being released.
Yeah,
I think every genre, every era, I would say.
I agree, but I just feel like the storytelling's getting less and less and less.
Kendrick Lamar is the number one artist on the fucking planet.
Yeah, and but he's one that's.
But he's not, though. He's representative. He's the most successful one. But
I don't.
There are endless amounts of hip hop artists that are making exactly the same kind of music that you fell in love with. The difference is today that we have access to so much more shit that is just completely poured out onto our algorithm, onto our radars or whatever. It is so much easier to be inundated with all of these other things that were just not as easily accessible as back then. So it seems like there's more of it, but I don't know that that's necessarily the case.
I agree with you, but I also think it has to do with the labels.
Well, fuck the labels, for sure.
But
yeah,
it's what they're pushing. They're not pushing the story. They're not pushing the storytelling.
It's hard for me to agree with that, because some of the biggest hip hop artists now are like so incredibly loud about reality.
We are making a turn, okay?
You think so?
Yeah, we are making a turn. But over the last 10 years, the storytelling has diminished. And I do agree. Kendrick, Cole, there are some guys out there that are inherently doing rap or hip hop in a lyrical storytelling process. But what we get fed and where the industry went was not that way for a while, in my opinion. And guys like Kendrick were shelved until all of a sudden he pops out.
I don't know. Kendrick has been putting in work for a really, really long time, and those of us who have been following it know that. I mean, any artist that comes across your radar in a big splashy way can be seen as like having just come out of nowhere because they were an industry plant or they were planted by their label or whatever. But, but that's just because you weren't
you weren't paying attention to the industry. No, I understand. Yeah, right. No, I understand. Yeah. Like her was shelved for 8 years before she was able to be an artist by Sony. Yeah, like you know, like but you didn't know she was behind the scenes writing for everybody. Like yeah, I get all that.
She rules.
Yeah, she's awesome. But I get all that. I had to back off of rap when we were going through all of that because the industry, I don't know, that whole drug codeine party scene really took over LA when I was out there. Like that, I mean, I can't tell you how many sessions I have with Molly Mall and like all these all of these drug sessions. It's all it is doing a bunch of drugs and doing music together. And it's great, but all you get is druggy music. And so maybe it was my experience with it. But when I got inundated in LA into that culture, it was, you know, Migos and even Bieber stuff and Chris Brown and all that stuff. It's all druggy shit.
I will offer this as a counterpoint. I think, and I realize that I'm saying this as a white consumer of it,
which we both are,
is that to be an inherently political act, Black music doesn't need to have political content in its lyrics. And by that I mean, for much of this country's history, to be a outwardly joyous, wealthy, braggadocious, outrageous, fun-loving human, you were not allowed to do that publicly.
Right.
And so I think to a certain extent, the very fact that Migos are able to become as successful as they are by making quote unquote druggy music is evidence of the growing political power in young Black artistry, right? It is an inherently political act to become successful in a system that was built to prevent that at any and all costs. However, I do agree that we work in a very, very, very exploitative and potentially abusive industry.
Yeah, hence
and
Diddy.
I do think, that's we could do a whole season of this podcast on that guy. But I do think that like when a young kid is given access to millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars,
right.
Sure, that can come with like its whole host of issues. But I would just encourage anyone listening to this to think about hip hop does not lose its political value if it's not talking about fucked up shit that they face in their daily lives.
Yeah, no,
right?
100%. No, and stories aren't always negative. You know, it's just, you know, and I only push. I'm a huge hip hop fan. And most of my artists that we deal with here at the studio are hip hop.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not pushing back because I don't like hip hop. I just want more Kendricks. That's all. I want more. I want more Coles. I want more of that. I want more Larizzi's. I want more D1s.
Great. Larizzi, LaRussell, they're all killing shit right now. I love to see it.
I want more D1s. I want more guys like that. You know, so. But anyway, well, great. Well, thanks for coming through today. I appreciate the conversation. I think we had a good run at it.
Can't wait to hear about how many people are going to be pissed off.
well, you want to tell anybody about your socials and where we can find?
Sure. I'm only on Instagram and it's Hey Bonita. That's HEYYY BONITA. And my website is amandamester.com. You can find me. I'm available for work, conversation. I love going to trivia. If anybody wants to take me to trivia. I love going to thrift stores. If anybody wants to go thrifting.
I'm sure you eat at the Maple Leaf a lot.
You know, not that much. You know why? Because I'm fucking sober and almost 40. And those shows don't start till 11 o'clock at night.
Right.
Sorry. I'm getting that time of my life where I'm like, I'm going to go to bed. I'll see you all in the morning.
Oh, God.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And it is important for something like this to exist because magical things can happen when things are said out loud to each other, face to face. That sounds so lame in a way, I know.
No,
but it's so true. It is so incredibly important for us to get together in person and have fucking conversations about this kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Because we are the ones who have the responsibility to document the stories that other people are saying, and it is our responsibility to be supportive of the disruptors and the truth tellers. And more often than not, those are our musicians.
Absolutely. 100%. It's our freedom.
Right. Totally.
The act of expression is our freedom. So,
goddamn right.
Goddamn right. Well, thanks so much, and I appreciate you so much. And thank you guys for watching. And if you'd like to watch more, please like and subscribe to the page. And
smash that subscribe button.
Smash it.
I've always wanted to say that.
There you go. Peace.